Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine with Behind the Markets. Happy Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, November 5th. Mark your calendars, the 5th of November. Remember, the 5th of November, because today tariffs get their day in court. Today, the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments in a case that says that the levies President Trump imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act are legal or not. They're going to hear arguments. Two lower courts have already ruled that they exceeded his powers, and the president himself has come out and said, quote, the most important case ever in the United States Supreme Court, end quote. Bit of an exaggeration, but there's been a lot of big cases in the Supreme Court over the years. The question really is, can the president evoke the Emergency Powers Act, basically, to impose tariffs? And look, tariff power lies with the people, lies with Congress. Was this really an emergency? Is something that has been happening over decades an emergency? The U.S. imports a lot more goods than it exports, but that's not new. That's old news, really. So the question really is, does the president have the authority to impose tariffs unilaterally? Does it have the authority, as spelled out in the Constitution, to take that away from Congress, the people, and do this himself? And it's funny, I have some notes here. When you look at poly market, the betting market, some folks think that the betting is 40% odds. They're illegal as written, but can be made legal, kind of like John Roberts wrote that to make Obamacare legal, basically. 35% odds that it's totally legal, and 35% that it's totally illegal. So basically, it's like a third split down the middle that they'll stick, basically. This is a big deal, and it's very interesting. Trade and deficits are a very complicated subject. I've been very tricky. Took me a while to understand this. But yes, we do have a deficit with goods, but not all trade is created equal. We buy goods. We have what we call a merchandise or a goods deficit, meaning that we import more hats, T-shirts, etc., sneakers from countries like China, Vietnam, whatever, than we export because they can manufacture it cheaper than us. But we also have a services surplus, meaning that we sell high-value things like software. So not all deficits are created equal. Let me give you an example. If we have $1 trillion deficit in goods like hats, okay, a deficit, but we have a $500 billion surplus in services like software, what's better? And I would argue that goods have a low return on capital. So they have a 5% return on capital. For every $1,000 they invest in that business, they get about 5% back. But services have a 30% return on capital. So basically, we are better off exporting $500 billion worth of software than they are exporting $1 trillion worth of hats and sneakers. Because while their number is bigger, our profit margins are higher on the smaller amount, on the services that we export. It's very interesting, all this stuff. And this really harkens back. We saw that Vice President Dick Cheney died yesterday, and I've been thinking a lot about the history. The president is going around and he's arguing the unitary executive theory of government. And I actually believe that if the founding fathers woke up today, they would have been shocked that President Trump could not have fired USAID, that people would basically debate any of these things. They believed that the executive had king-like powers during his or her term in office. But you think about Vice President Dick Cheney and his role in all this. He worked under Nixon, where Nixon was impeached, basically, for exercising the unitary executive theory. And then you see that the Congress, there's always been this struggle between the Congress, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. And if you look after the Civil War, Congress took power back from the executive. And you look after Nixon's impeachment, Congress took power back from the executive, but now President Trump is really reasserting the executive branch in government, and the tariffs are one way he is actually doing that. It raises a lot of very interesting questions about the nature of our Constitution and which branches are competing, and that's what I always try to say to my kids, that what's great about our Constitution is that we have three branches. that compete with each other for power, and that we really try to tease out the ambitions in each branch. But today we sit at the footstep, at the door, basically, of major American history. And I thought that it was very important to spend this morning and just talk about that with you. History is being made today, and actually the direction of the unitary executive or not, whether Congress maintains this power to keep its tariff capacity intact or not, all hinges on what the Supreme Court decides. And that's a very big deal. Anyway, that's all I have. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.